hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Colt Warrington woke before his alarm, as he did most mornings. Military habits died hard. The red numbers on the clock read 4:17 a.m. Beside him, Rhea slept facing away, curled toward the edge of the bed, as if even in sleep she was trying to create distance. He slid from beneath the covers without disturbing her and padded to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a man whose 40 years showed in the lines around his eyes and the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. His movements were efficient: brush teeth, splash water, run a hand through short hair. No wasted motion. Through the bathroom window, he could see the dense fog that had settled over their small Oregon town overnight. It pressed against the glass like a living thing, obscuring the neighbor's house that should have been visible. December in Oregon meant darkness at both ends of the day. Colt didn't mind. He'd always been comfortable operating in shadows. Downstairs, he started coffee and pulled eggs for the refrigerator. The routine was automatic, giving his mind space to wander. Something fell off in the house lately, had for months now. Like the fog outside, a heaviness had settled over their home that made it hard to see clearly, hard to breathe sometimes. Footsteps on the stairs announced Harper's arrival. His niece No, his daughter now, legally and in every way that mattered, appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack already slung over one shoulder. "Morning," she said, her voice still scratchy with sleep. At 14, Harper was all angles and potential, caught in that space between childhood and whatever came next. She had her mother's Colt's sister's eyes. Sometimes it hurt to look at her and see Jessica's ghost staring back. "You're up early," Colt said, cracking eggs into a pan. "Hungry?" Harper nodded and slid onto a stool at the counter, pulling out a thick binder. "I have that science presentation today. Just want to go over my notes again. The ecosystem project." Colt remembered her working on it for weeks. "I'm sure you'll nail it." Harper shrugged, but he caught the small smile that flickered across her face as confidence. He slid a plate of eggs in front of her, along with a glass of orange juice. More footsteps on the stairs, lighter this time. Rhea appeared in the doorway in her silk robe, perfectly composed even at this hour. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, her makeup already applied. Sometimes Colt wondered if she woke up before him and got ready, then pretended to be asleep when he stirred. "Coffee," he offered, holding up the pot. "Please," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. She took the mug he extended, but didn't drink, just held it between her hands as if for warmth. "I was telling Dad about my ecosystem presentation," Harper said, glancing up at Rhea. "We've been working on it since October." Rhea nodded vaguely, checking something on her phone. "That's nice, honey." Colt saw the light dim in Harper's eyes. The girl turned back to her notes, shoulders hunching slightly. This had become their normal Harper reaching out, Rhea offering the barest acknowledgement before retreating to whatever existed on her phone screen. "I thought maybe we could all go out after Harper's presentation," Colt said, keeping his voice neutral. "Celebrate the end of the project." Rhea looked up, seeming surprised he'd suggested it. "Oh, I have that client dinner tonight." "The Barton account? I mentioned it last week." Had she? Colt couldn't remember, but then they didn't really talk anymore. They existed in parallel, sharing space but rarely connecting. "Next time," he said to Harper, who nodded without looking up. Rhea drained her coffee and set the mug in the sink. "I should get ready. Big day at the office." After she left, silence settled over the kitchen. Colt watched Harper pretend to study, though her eyes hadn't moved across the page in minutes. "Hey," he said softly, "you ready to tell me what's on your mind?" Harper looked up, startled, then shook her head. "It's nothing. Doesn't seem like nothing." She closed her binder, avoiding his gaze. "Just, does she hate me?" The question hit Colt like a physical blow. No, not that phrase, he reminded himself. The question hit him hard, knocking the air from his lungs. "No, Harper. She doesn't hate you. She never talks to me. She barely looks at me. Rhea's just going through something right now." The excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears. "It's not about you." Harper nodded, but he could tell she didn't believe him. Hell, he wasn't sure he believed himself. His home had felt like a stranger's house for nearly a year now. "I'll be at your presentation," he promised. Front row. That, at least, earned him a genuine smile. Thanks, Dad. The word still caught him sometimes, a reminder of the promise he'd made to his sister before she died. I'll take care of her, Jess. I swear it, that he wouldn't fail that promise. Not for anything. The machine shop hummed with the sound of precision equipment. Colt adjusted his safety goggles and checked the measurements on the titanium component one more time before starting the CNC machine. The familiar process calmed him, numbers and specifications replacing the nagging worry that had followed him from home. Warrington, you got a minute? Knox's voice carried over the mechanical din. Colt nodded and stepped away from his station, following his co-worker to the break room. Knox was a big man with a shaved head and hands scarred from decades working with metal. They'd started at the factory on the same day, 15 years ago, and had been friends ever since. Coffee's fresh, Knox said, pouring 2 cups. You look like you need it. That obvious, huh? Knox shrugged. You've had that 1,000-yard stare all morning. Holiday stress already. Colt accepted the mug, considering whether to brush it off, as Knox suggested. Instead, he found himself saying, something's off at home. Knox leaned against the counter, eyes narrowing. How long? Months. Maybe longer. Colt stared into the black coffee. Rhea's different. Distant. You ever think it's not just the season? Knox asked, voice carefully neutral. Colt glanced up. What do you mean? Just that people change. Or they show who they really are, eventually. Knox shrugged. My ex-wife was one person for 7 years, then suddenly she wasn't. Or maybe she never was, and I just didn't want to see it. The thought had occurred to Colt late at night when Rhea's breathing indicated she was only pretending to sleep. Had she changed, or had she simply stopped pretending? Harper feels it too, Colt admitted. Says Rhea barely acknowledges her existence these days. Knox's expression darkened. That kid's been through enough. Yeah. The word came out rough. Colt cleared his throat. Anyway, it's probably nothing. Sure, Knox said, clearly not believing it either. But maybe keep your eyes open wider than usual. The warning stayed with Colt through the rest of his shift. By the time he pulled into the driveway that evening, his nerves felt rubbed raw with anticipation of what exactly? He wasn't sure what he was dreading, only that something was coming. Harper had texted that she'd gotten a ride home with a friend and was already there. Rhea's car was in the driveway too, which surprised him. Her client dinners usually meant she wasn't home until well after he'd gone to bed. He entered through the side door into the kitchen. Harper sat at the table with homework spread around her. Hey, kiddo, how'd the presentation go? He asked. Harper's face lit up. Really good. Ms. Paulson said my research on ocean acidification was college level. That's my girl, Colt said, genuine pride warming his voice. Sorry I missed it. It's okay. There'll be other presentations. From the living room, he heard Rhea's voice, low and urgent. He couldn't make out the words, only the tone secretive, intimate. Mom's on the phone, Harper said, watching his face. She's been talking for like an hour. Colt nodded, hanging his jacket by the door. I'll start dinner. Pasta okay? Harper nodded, turning back to her homework. Colt moved to the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients while straining to hear the conversation in the other room. It wasn't like him to eavesdrop, but Knox's words echoed in his mind. Keep your eyes open wider than usual. A few minutes later, the living room went quiet. Colt concentrated on chopping vegetables, aware of Rhea's approach before she entered the kitchen. You're home early, she said, and he didn't miss how quickly she slid her phone into her pocket. Regular time, actually. He kept his tone light. How was your day? Fine. She glanced at Harper. How was your presentation? Harper looked up, surprise flickering across her face at being acknowledged. It was good. I got an A. That's nice, Rhea said, already turning away. I need to change. I have a dinner tonight. I thought that was the Barton dinner. This morning you said. Different client, Rhea interrupted. The Barton dinner got pushed to tomorrow. Colt watched her leave, noting the slight flush on her neck that always appeared when she wasn't being entirely truthful. A habit she'd had since they first met 17 years ago. Her smile when she'd entered had been too bright, too practiced. A mask she put on and removed at will. He turned back to the cutting board, aware of Harper watching him. She's lying, isn't she? Harper asked, her voice small. Colt didn't answer. He didn't need to. We should host Christmas Eve at my mother's this year, Rhea announced 3 days later over breakfast. She has more space, and the whole family will be there. Colt looked up from his coffee. The whole family meant Rhea's side cousins, aunts, uncles, and of course Adele, his mother-in-law. The woman had made it clear from the beginning that Colt wasn't what she'd envisioned for her daughter. In nearly 16 years of marriage, that opinion hadn't softened. "We always do Christmas here," he said carefully, "and it's always cramped. Mother has that new extension on the dining room. It makes more sense." Harper sat silently, pushing cereal around her bowl. Colt knew she hated these gatherings. Adele treated her like an afterthought, a charity case Colt had taken in rather than his daughter. "What do you think, Harper?" he asked, bringing her into the conversation. Harper shrugged, not looking up. "Whatever. It's decided then," Rhea said, as if Harper had enthusiastically agreed. "I'll tell Mother today." "Wait," Colt said, setting down his mug. "We haven't talked about gifts yet." Rhea's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "What about them?" Harper mentioned a necklace at the mall last month. The silver one with the mountain charm. He turned to Harper. "The one that reminded you of our camping trip." A small smile tugged at Harper's lips. "You remembered that?" "Of course I did." Rhea's sigh cut through the moment. "Let's not overspend this year," she said, her voice clipped. "Things are tight." Colt frowned. "We're doing fine financially." His job at the factory paid well, and Rhea's marketing position brought in even more. They'd never had money concerns. "We have expenses coming up," Rhea said vaguely. "Just keep it reasonable, okay?" Before he could press further, her phone chimed. She glanced at it and stood abruptly. "I need to take this. Work." She disappeared into the living room, leaving Colt and Harper in uncomfortable silence. "It's okay, Dad," Harper said quietly. "I don't need the necklace." But Colt had seen the hope in her eyes when he'd mentioned it. "We'll see," he said noncommittally. That night, after Harper had gone to bed, Colt went downstairs for a glass of water. The house was dark except for a sliver of light coming from beneath the office door. He approached quietly, not intending to eavesdrop, but then heard Rhea's hushed voice. I know, she was saying. "It's all arranged. After Christmas, we'll have everything we need." A pause as she listened to whoever was on the other end. "He doesn't suspect anything. He's completely clueless." A small laugh, cold and unfamiliar. "Trust me, it'll be fine." Colt stood frozen in the hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I have to go," Rhea whispered. "I'll call you tomorrow." Colt backed away silently, retreating to the kitchen. A moment later, the office door opened and Rhea emerged, startling when she saw him. "God, you scared me," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "What are you doing up?" "Getting water," he replied, holding up his glass. "Who were you talking to so late?" "Just Mother," Rhea said, the lie sliding easily from her lips. "Discussing Christmas arrangements." Colt nodded, as if he believed her. "At midnight. You know how she is. Once she gets an idea in her head." Rhea trailed off, then forced a smile. "I'm exhausted. Coming to bed." In a bit. After she left, Colt sat alone in the dark kitchen. The conversation replayed in his mind, fragments standing out in sharp relief. After Christmas, he doesn't suspect anything, completely clueless, his hands clenched around the water glass. Something was coming, something she'd been planning for a while. And whatever it was, she didn't think he was smart enough to see it coming. Knox's warning echoed in his mind. "Keep your eyes open wider than usual." Too late, Colt realized his eyes had been closed for far too long. Colt sat in his truck outside the bank, staring at the ATM receipt in his hand. The balance was wrong, very wrong. Their joint savings account should have held just over $48,000. The emergency fund they'd built together over years of careful planning. The receipt showed a balance of $17,000 and change $30,000. Gandhi folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his wallet. His first instinct was to confront Rhea immediately, but something held him back. The memory of her hushed phone conversation, the secretive smiles, the increasing distance. After Christmas, we'll have everything we need. Instead of heading home, he drove to the factory, though his shift had ended hours ago. Knox would still be there, working overtime as he always did around the holidays. The shop floor was quiet. Most of the machines shut down for the night. Knox stood at his workstation, grinding a metal edge with practiced precision. "Thought you'd be home by now," Knox said when he spotted Colt, shutting off the grinder. Something came up. Colt held out the receipt. "Notice anything wrong?" Knox studied it, then let out a low whistle. "That's a big withdrawal. Rhea mentioned anything about it?" "Not a word." Knox handed back the receipt, his expression grave. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know yet." Colt rubbed his jaw, feeling the stubble there. "But it fits with other things. She's been secretive. Phone calls that stop when I enter the room. Unexplained absences. You think she's planning to leave?" The question hung in the air, giving shape to the fear Colt hadn't fully acknowledged until now. "Maybe." He struggled to keep his voice steady. "But why take the money now? Why not wait until after she tells me?" Knox crossed his arms. "Tax reasons? End-of-year financial crap? Or maybe what? Maybe she's setting something up, getting her ducks in a row before making her move." Colt considered this. It fit with what he'd overheard. "After Christmas. I need to figure out what's going on," he said finally. "Without letting her know, I'm suspicious." "Careful, man." Knox's expression was somber. "If she's planning what I think she is, confronting her might make things worse." Colt nodded, already turning over possibilities in his mind. He needed more information before deciding how to proceed. When he got home, the house was quiet. Rhea's car was missing from the driveway, but Harper's backpack lay on the kitchen counter. He checked his watch 6:30 p.m. She should have been picked up from her after-school program 2 hours ago, but he found her in her bedroom, headphones on, textbook open on her lap. "Hey," he said when she looked up. "How long have you been home?" Harper removed her headphones. "Since about 5. I walked. Cole frowned. "From school? That's over 3 miles. Rhea forgot to pick me up." Harper's voice was carefully neutral, but he could see the hurt beneath. "I waited for an hour, then started walking. Mrs. Kelly from Science Club saw me and drove me the rest of the way." Anger flared in Colt's chest, hot and immediate. "Did you call Rhea?" "Yeah. It went to voicemail. And you didn't call me." Harper looked down at her textbook. "You were at work. I didn't want to bother you." Colt sat on the edge of her bed, fighting to keep his voice calm. "You're never a bother, Harper. Never. If you need me, you call. I don't care what I'm doing." She nodded, still not meeting his eyes. Did Rhea say why she forgot? A slight hesitation. She was with someone. She said their meeting ran long, and she didn't hear her phone. Did she say who? Harper shook her head. "Just someone from work, I think." She finally looked up at him, her eyes troubled. "Dad, is everything okay? With you and Rhea?" The question caught him off guard. He considered lying, offering the reassurance she clearly wanted. But Harper deserved better than that. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But whatever happens, you and I are a team, okay? That doesn't change. Ever." Harper nodded, a small smile breaking through her concern. "Okay, now," he said, standing up. "How about pizza for dinner? Since apparently we're on our own tonight. Can we get stuffed crust? Is there any other kind?" Colt asked, earning a genuine laugh from his daughter. Later, after Harper had gone to bed, Colt went into the home office and opened the filing cabinet where they kept their financial records. The most recent bank statements were missing. So were the property tax documents for the house and the insurance paperwork that he sat back in the chair, a cold certainty settling in his gut. Rhea wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to take everything that Nessa's Bakery sat on a corner 2 blocks from the town square, its windows steamed with the heat of fresh bread and pastries. The bell above the door jingled as Colt entered, bringing with it a gust of cold December air. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Nessa called from behind the counter, her smile warm and genuine. At 35, she looked much the same as she had when they were teenagers, petite with wild curly hair she kept barely contained in a messy bun, eyes that crinkled at the corners when she laughed. "Morning, Ness," Colt said, stamping the slush from his boots. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for a mug. She knew how he took it black with 1 sugar. "Please." The bakery was empty this early, the morning rush not yet begun. Nessa set the coffee in front of him and leaned on the counter. "You look like hell, Colt." He managed a weak smile. "Always did appreciate your honesty." "One of my many charms," she agreed. Seriously though, what's going on? You've got that look. What look? The same one you had when you were 17 and found out your dad lost the house. Like you're trying to solve every problem at once without letting anyone see you sweat. Colt stared into his coffee. He'd known Nessa since kindergarten. She could read him better than anyone, including his wife. You want to talk about it? She asked softly. I don't even know where to start. The beginning usually works. So he told her about the money missing from their account, about Ria's secretive phone calls and the documents missing from their files, about Harper being forgotten at school. Nessa listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. I think she's planning to leave, Colt finished. After Christmas. And I think she wants to take everything, the house, the savings. Maybe even try for custody of Harper. Nessa's eyes widened. She'd do that? Harper isn't even. She stopped herself. Biologically hers. Colt finished. No, but we've been raising her together since Jessica died. 5 years now. And you adopted her officially. Yeah, but Ria didn't. She said she would, but there was always some reason to delay it. Nessa was quiet for a moment, tapping her fingers against the counter. Have you confronted her? Not yet. I need to know what I'm dealing with first. What she's planning. And what are you going to do when you find out? Colt looked up at his oldest friend. Protect Harper. Beyond that, I don't know. Nessa reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. Whatever's coming, don't be the last to act, Colt. If she's planning something, you need to be ready. The advice hit home. Colt had been reactive for too long, watching his marriage dissolve without taking steps to either save it or protect himself and Harper from the fallout. You're right, he said, squeezing her hand back before releasing it. I need to get ahead of this. And you need allies, Nessa added. People you can trust. You know I'm in your corner. Always have been. The sincerity in her voice warmed something in him that had been cold for too long. I know, Ness. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this is over and you're still standing. As he left the bakery, Colt felt something shift inside him. The passive acceptance that had characterized the past year was giving way to determination. Ria might be planning to destroy everything he'd built, but he wouldn't make it easy for her. Not anymore. Adele Warrington's house loomed against the darkening sky, every window ablaze with light. Christmas Eve at the Warrington estate had always been an exercise in endurance for Colt. This year, with tension coiled tight in his chest, it felt like walking into enemy territory. Ready? He asked Harper as they sat in his truck in the circular driveway. She tugged at the collar of her dress forest green velvet that had been her Christmas gift from him last year. I guess. We don't have to stay long, he promised. Just enough to be polite. Harper gave him a look far too knowing for her 14 years. It's okay, Dad. I know how these things work. The front door opened before they reached it, Adele standing in the entrance like a sentinel. At 60, she remained striking tall and lean, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and the kind of posture that came from generations of privilege. There you are, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Everyone's already here. Traffic. Colt lied smoothly, though they'd been sitting in the driveway for 10 minutes gathering courage that Adele's gaze swept over Harper, assessing. That dress is getting small on you, dear. Harper flushed, crossing her arms over her chest. Colt placed a protective hand on her shoulder. She looks beautiful, he said firmly. Adele's smile tightened. Yes, well, come in. Your wife's been anxious about your arrival. Your wife. Never Ria, as if she needed to remind him of the connection. The house was crowded with Ria's extended family, cousins whose names Colt could never keep straight, aunts and uncles who viewed him with thinly veiled curiosity, as if wondering how he'd managed to marry into their circle. Ria stood near the massive Christmas tree, glass of wine in hand, laughing at something her cousin Eric had said. She spotted them and excused herself, making her way across the room. Finally, she said, the word just sharp enough to notice. Mother was about to send out a search party. We're here now, Colt said, refusing to be baited. Ria's gaze flicked to Harper, then away. Food's in the dining room. Gifts will be opened after dinner. She returned to her conversation, dismissing them. Harper looked up at Colt, a silent question in her eyes. Let's get some food, he suggested, steering her toward the dining room. The meal was elaborate prime rib, roasted vegetables, potatoes, and some French preparation Colt couldn't pronounce. They sat at the far end of the table, away from Rhea, who held court near her mother at the head. That Knox's words echoed in Colt's mind. Keep your eyes open. So he watched, noting how Rhea kept glancing at her phone beneath the table, how she exchanged meaningful looks with her mother, how she barely touched her food, tension evident in the set of her shoulders. After dinner, they gathered in the living room around the tree. Presents were distributed, expensive bottles of wine for the adults, gift cards, and electronic gadgets for the younger generation. Harper sat quietly beside Colt, hands folded in her lap. When everyone had received at least one gift, Adele clapped her hands. Is that everyone? Excellent. Well, let's... Wait, Colt interrupted. Harper hasn't gotten anything yet. A hush fell over the room. Adele's smile froze on her face. Oh, I must have. It must be behind the tree. But her performative searching revealed nothing. Harper stared at the floor, her cheeks flaming. It's okay, she whispered to Colt. Really? But it wasn't okay. Not even close. Anger burned in his chest, not just at Adele, but at himself for bringing Harper into this situation where she would be humiliated. This was supposed to be open last, Rhea suddenly announced, producing an envelope from her purse. All eyes turned to her. It's for you, Colt. The room went silent as she crossed to where he sat and handed him the envelope. It was heavy, expensive stationery with his name written in Rhea's precise handwriting. Open it, she urged, a strange light in her eyes. Colt tore open the envelope, aware of the entire room watching. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He unfolded it and began to read. Colt, after careful consideration, I've decided our marriage is over. I'm filing for divorce immediately after the holidays. I'll be taking the house and our joint savings, which I've already secured. I'll also be petitioning for primary custody of Harper, though arrangements can be made for visitation. That I hope we can handle this civilly. That Rhea. Colt read it twice, the words swimming before his eyes. When he looked up, Rhea was watching him with a small, satisfied smile. I wanted to tell you privately, she said, her voice carrying in the silent room. But then I realized everyone would know soon enough. It's over, Colt. I'm taking the house, the savings, and custody. We'll arrange for Harper's care elsewhere. Harper made a small, wounded sound beside him. Colt placed his hand over hers, feeling it tremble beneath his palm. You're doing this now? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Here. Rhea's smile turned cruel. Why not? My family should know what's happening. From across the room, Colt caught Adele's eye. There was no surprise there, only cold satisfaction. She'd known. Of course she'd known. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Rhea's cousin Eric smirked, enjoying the spectacle. Others looked uncomfortable, gazes sliding away from the unfolding drama. Colt stood slowly, extending his hand to Harper. Let's go. Colt. Rhea started, her tone conciliatory. Be reasonable. We're leaving, he said, cutting her off. Harper. The girl stood, her face pale but composed. She held her head high as she followed him to the door, ignoring the whispers that trailed after them. Outside, the cold air hit like a slap. Harper stopped on the front steps, her breath coming in quick puffs of condensation. She wants to get rid of me, she said, voice breaking. Colt pulled her into his arms. That is not going to happen. Do you understand me? Not ever. Harper nodded against his chest, her tears soaking into his shirt. Over her head, Colt stared at the brightly lit house, at the shadows of people moving behind the windows, at the life Rhea had decided to discard so casually, so cruelly. She thought she'd won, thought she'd blindsided him completely. But Colt had survived worse than this, and he was done being reactive. That it was time to show Rhea exactly who she was dealing with. The week after Christmas passed in a blur of legal meetings and quiet preparations. Rhea moved most of her belongings out while Colt was at work, leaving the house half empty. Harper watched silently from the doorway as Rhea packed her designer clothes and jewelry, not bothering to say goodbye when she left. Where's she staying? Harper asked that night over the pizza Colt had brought home. With a friend, Colt said carefully that Harper's expression was too knowing for her years. You mean with her boyfriend? Colt set down his slice, studying his daughter. What makes you say that? I'm not stupid, Dad. Harper shrugged. I saw her with him once when I was supposed to be at dance class, but it got canceled. They were at that coffee shop by the high school. She didn't see me. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to hurt you. Harper looked down at her plate, and I thought, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some other explanation. Colt reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You don't have to protect me, Harper. That's my job. Are we going to lose the house? She asked, voicing the fear he could see in her eyes. No, Colt said firmly. We're not losing anything. The next day, Rhea returned with a woman in a sharp business suit, her attorney, she explained curtly. They wanted to discuss arrangements for Harper until the custody hearing. I found a wonderful boarding school in Vermont, Rhea said, as if discussing vacation plans rather than uprooting Harper's life. They have an excellent academic program, and you can visit during holidays. No, Colt said simply that Rhea's practiced smile faltered. Excuse me, Harper stays with me. The attorney cleared her throat. Mr. Warrington, these decisions should be made with Harper's best interests in mind. A stable environment during this transition. A stable environment is exactly what she has, Colt interrupted. Her home, her school, her friends. This house will be sold as part of the divorce settlement, Rhea stated coldly. So her home is temporary at best. We'll see about that. Something in his tone made Rhea pause, uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time. What does that mean? Colt stood, ending the conversation. You'll find out soon enough. In the meantime, Harper stays with me. If you want to discuss it further, you can contact my attorney. After they left, Harper emerged from her room where she'd been hiding during the confrontation. Did you mean it? She asked. About me staying with you? Every word, Colt promised. Pack a bag for tonight, though. We're staying with Knox for a few days. What? Just a precaution. I don't want Rhea trying anything while the lawyers figure things out. What he didn't say was that he'd seen the calculating look in Rhea's eyes. She wasn't above manipulating the situation to her advantage, even if it meant using Harper as a pawn. Later that week, Colt received notice that Rhea had moved in with Marshall Raines, her high school boyfriend, who now owned an upscale gym in town. The pieces were falling into place. The affair had been going on for at least a year, judging by when Rhea's behavior had changed. She's liquidating your joint accounts, his attorney, Daniel Moss, informed him during their meeting. Moving assets around, preparing for a significant financial claim. Colt nodded, unsurprised. And custody? She's filed for full custody with limited visitation for you. Her argument is that Harper's emotional well-being would be better served in a traditional family environment with her and her new partner. Anger flared in Colt's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. How worried should I be? Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying him. Ordinarily, very. She has resources, connections through her mother. Judges in this county tend to favor mothers in custody disputes. But a small smile crossed the attorney's face. But you've been busy, haven't you, Mr. Warrington? Colt matched his smile. I have. What Rhea hadn't known, what she had never bothered to ask, was that Colt had suspected everything for months. The night after he'd overheard her secretive phone call, he'd gone to see Daniel Moss, an attorney Nessa had recommended. He's not flashy, she'd said, but he's thorough, and he won't be intimidated by Adele's country club connections. On Daniel's advice, Colt had begun documenting everything: Rhea's absences, her neglect of Harper, the unexplained expenditures. He'd installed cameras in the common areas of the house, capturing her indifference to Harper and her late-night phone conversations. When she'd withdrawn the first $10,000 from her joint account, he'd opened separate accounts and begun moving assets. Not everything that would have tipped her off, but enough to ensure he and Harper wouldn't be left with nothing. The house had been a masterstroke. It had never been in both their names, despite what Rhea believed. Jessica had left it to Colt when she died, with the provision that it would pass to Harper when she turned 25. Rhea's name appeared nowhere on the deed. Colt had also filed preemptive custody petitions based on his status as Harper's legal adoptive parent, something Rhea had repeatedly refused to become, claiming the paperwork was too complicated. As for the savings Rhea thought she'd secured, half had already been moved to accounts in Colt's name only. The rest had been invested in college funds for Harper that Rhea couldn't touch. "You've been planning this for a while," Daniel observed. "Most clients come to me after the bomb has already exploded." "Military training," Colt said with a shrug. "Always have a contingency plan." Now, as January rolled into February, the pieces of his counter-strategy began falling into place. The first hearing for temporary custody arrangements was scheduled for February 15th. Rhea arrived at the courthouse dressed in an expensive suit, her hair and makeup flawless. Marshall stood at her side, looking every inch the supportive partner in his tailored jacket and designer watch. Adele sat in the front row behind them, her expression smug. She'd always thought Colt was beneath her daughter. This divorce was simply the correction of a mistake made years ago. Colt sat with Daniel at the plaintiff's table, Harper beside him. Knox and Nessa had come for moral support, sitting directly behind them. Harper gripped Colt's hand tightly, her knuckles white. "It's going to be okay," he whispered to her. "All rise." The bailiff called as Judge Henley entered the courtroom. The proceedings began with Rhea's attorney presenting their case. Harper needed stability during this difficult transition. Rhea and her partner could provide a traditional two-parent household. The boarding school would remove Harper from the conflict zone of the divorce. Furthermore, the attorney continued, Mr. Warrington's work schedule means Harper is often left alone for extended periods. Mrs. Warrington has more flexibility to be present for Harper's needs. Colt felt Harper stiffen beside him at the blatant lie. Rhea had barely acknowledged her existence for the past year. When it was Daniel's turn, he approached the bench with a thick folder of documentation. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to clarify a few points. First, regarding custody, Mr. Warrington is Harper's legal adoptive parent. Mrs. Warrington is not. She declined to participate in the adoption process 5 years ago when Harper came to live with them after her mother's death." The judge looked up, surprised. "Is this correct, Mrs. Warrington?" Rhea shifted uncomfortably. "We planned to do it together, but there were complications with the paperwork." "For 5 years." Judge Henley's tone was skeptical. Daniel continued, "Additionally, we have documentation of Mrs. Warrington's absence from Harper's life over the past year. School records showing Mr. Warrington attending every parent-teacher conference and school event alone. Medical records indicating Mr. Warrington as the sole parent present for appointments." He placed printouts of text messages on the judge's bench. Messages from Mrs. Warrington to Harper, repeatedly canceling plans or forgetting commitments. And most concerningly, video evidence of Mrs. Warrington's partner, Mr. Marshall Raines, with whom she now resides. Rhea's head snapped up. "What about Marshall?" Daniel's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Raines has a sealed record from 2018 for domestic violence against a former girlfriend. While the charges were eventually dropped, the police report indicates a pattern of concerning behavior." Marshall paled, whispering urgently to Rhea's attorney. Rhea herself looked stunned, as if the floor had fallen out from beneath her. "Given these facts," Daniel concluded, "we're requesting that temporary full custody be granted to Mr. Warrington, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Warrington until permanent arrangements can be established." The judge reviewed the documents carefully, occasionally glancing up at Rhea and Marshall. "I'd like to speak with Harper privately," she finally said. "In my chambers." Harper squeezed Colt's hand before following the judge. The minutes ticked by slowly, every second feeling like an hour. When they returned, Harper's expression was composed, but her eyes were red-rimmed. Judge Henley took her seat. "Having reviewed the evidence and spoken with Harper, I'm granting temporary full custody to Mr. Warrington." She looked directly at Rhea. "Mrs. Warrington will have supervised visitation every other weekend, should Harper wish to participate." Rhea stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. He's manipulated everything." "Mrs. Warrington," the judge warned, "control yourself or I'll have you removed." "He can't do this." Rhea's voice rose hysterically. "That's my house. My money." Daniel cleared his throat. "Actually, Your Honor, regarding the property, claims the house in question belongs solely to Mr. Warrington. It was inherited from his sister, Jessica Newman, with Harper named as the eventual beneficiary. I have the deed and will documentation here." He produced another folder. As for the financial assets, we have bank records showing Mrs. Warrington removed approximately $30,000 from joint accounts without Mr. Warrington's knowledge or consent. We're requesting those funds be frozen until the division of assets can be formally addressed. Judge Henley nodded. So ordered. We'll reconvene for a full hearing on the financial matters next month. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Rhea stood frozen, her perfect mask crumbling as the reality of her situation sank in. She had no claim to the house. Her access to the money she'd taken was now blocked. And most devastating of all, she'd lost Harper as they left the courtroom. Marshall pulled away from Rhea, already distancing himself. Adele's expression had transformed from smug certainty to shocked disbelief. How did you do it? Harper asked quietly as they walked to the car. How did you know what she was planning? Colt put his arm around her shoulders. I didn't, not exactly, but I knew something was wrong, so I prepared for the worst. And hoped for the best? She asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. Something like that. The days following the hearing brought Rhea's carefully constructed world crashing down around her. Marshall, having realized there would be no financial windfall, ended their relationship within a week. The domestic violence revelation had been the final straw for Rhea, who hadn't known about his past. He's claiming you fabricated the evidence. Knox reported after running into Marshall at the gas station. Says you're out to destroy him. Colt shook his head. The police report is real. Daniel found it during his background check. Doesn't matter, Knox said with a grim smile. He's already moving on. Saw him with some blonde at the steakhouse last night. Rhea's professional life suffered as well. The scandal of the public courtroom outburst reached her workplace, where appearances mattered almost as much as results. She was quietly demoted, then eventually let go. Most surprising was Adele's reaction. Rather than rallying to her daughter's defense, she retreated into stony silence. When Rhea showed up at her mother's doorstep after Marshall ended things, Adele reluctantly took her in but made her disapproval clear. She's embarrassed, Nessa explained when Colt mentioned it during one of her visits to bring pastries for Harper. Adele cares about reputation more than anything. Rhea didn't just fail at her marriage, she failed spectacularly and publicly. I never wanted to humiliate her, Colt said, and meant it. Despite everything, he'd once loved Rhea. I just needed to protect Harper. Nessa's expression softened. You did what you had to do. No one blames you for that. By the time the financial hearing arrived in March, Rhea had lost much of her earlier bravado. She sat alone at the defendant's table, her attorney present but subdued. The judge ordered the return of the funds Rhea had taken, minus reasonable living expenses. The house remained with Colt and Harper, as did most of their joint assets since Colt had been the primary breadwinner throughout the marriage. Rhea left the courthouse that day with far less than she planned on. No house, no significant settlement, and most importantly, no Harper. Later that evening, as Colt made dinner, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Is this Colt Warrington? A woman's voice asked when he answered. Yes. This is Vera Jenkins from Child Protective Services. I'm calling because we received a report expressing concern about the welfare of Harper Newman in your care. Cold dread washed over him. What kind of report? The caller alleged neglect and possible emotional abuse. Standard procedure requires us to investigate all reports. Colt's hand tightened around the phone. Who made the report? I'm not at liberty to say, but we'll need to schedule a home visit and interview Harper separately. After arranging the visit for the following day, Colt hung up and stood motionless in the kitchen. There was only one person who would make such a report. Rhea's final attempt to regain control had just revealed how far she was willing to go. The CPS investigation was thorough but brief. Harper, interviewed at school, was clear and unwavering in her description of life with Colt. The caseworker who visited their home found nothing concerning, quite the opposite. Honestly, Mr. Warrington, she said as she prepared to leave, it's rare to see such a stable, loving environment during a divorce. Harper is clearly thriving in your care. Thank you, Colt said, relief evident in his voice. She's my priority. The caseworker hesitated at the door. Off the record, false reports during custody disputes aren't uncommon. but they're also not taken lightly by the court. The warning was clear. If Rhea was behind the report, it could backfire severely. That a week later, Colt received notice that Rhea had withdrawn her petition for custody. The final divorce decree granted him full custody of Harper, with Rhea having supervised visitation rights that she rarely exercised. That IT was over. All of the point 1 year later, the house smelled of pine and cinnamon. A modestly sized Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated with handmade ornaments Harper had created over the years, plus a few new additions. Is the table set properly? Harper called from the dining room. Nessa's bringing those fancy napkins. Colt smiled at his daughter's excitement. It looks perfect. The past year hadn't been easy, but they'd weathered it together. Harper had thrown herself into school and activities, her grades improving as the shadow of tension lifted from their home. Colt had received a promotion at the factory, moving into management where his precise attention to detail was valued. Rhea had eventually left town, moving to Seattle for a fresh start. She called Harper occasionally, their conversations brief and stilted. The wound was still too fresh for anything more, but Colt encouraged the contact. Despite everything, Rhea had been part of Harper's life for years. The doorbell rang, and Harper rushed to answer it. Knox entered first, a bottle of wine in one hand and a brightly wrapped package in the other. "Merry Christmas, kiddo," he said, handing the gift to Harper. "Don't shake it. It's fragile." Behind him came Nessa, arms laden with bakery boxes. "I might have gone overboard with dessert," she admitted with a laugh. Colt took the boxes from her, their hands brushing briefly. The contact sent a familiar warmth through him, one he'd been noticing more frequently in recent months. Nessa had been a constant presence this past year, offering support, advice, and friendship without asking for anything in return. Dinner was lively, conversation flowing easily among the four of them. They'd become a kind of family, bound not by blood but by choice and loyalty. After the meal, they gathered in the living room for gifts. Knox received a vintage record of his favorite jazz musician that Colt had tracked down. Nessa unwrapped a custom-made sign for her bakery that Harper had designed. "And Harper, this is from me," Colt said, handing her a small box wrapped in silver paper. "I've been saving it for a while." Harper opened it carefully, gasping when she saw what was inside. The silver necklace with the mountain charm, the one she'd admired in the mall last year, before everything fell apart. "You remembered," she whispered, lifting it from the box. "Of course I did." Harper turned, allowing him to fasten it around her neck. The small silver mountain glinted in the light from the Christmas tree. "I have something for you, too," Knox announced, retrieving his package from beneath the tree. "Though I can't take full credit. It was Harper's idea." Colt unwrapped it to find a framed photograph Harper and Colt at her science fair last spring, both grinning widely at the camera. Harper had won first place. It had been their first major celebration after the divorce was finalized. "We didn't have many recent pictures," Harper explained. "Just the two of us, I mean." "It's perfect," Colt said, his voice rough with emotion. Later, after gifts had been exchanged and dessert devoured, Knox headed home with promises to return for New Year's. Nessa stayed behind to help clean up, working alongside Colt in comfortable silence. "You've done well, you know," she said as they loaded the dishwasher. "With Harper, with everything." Colt glanced into the living room, where Harper sat reading one of her new books, the necklace catching the light as she turned a page. "We're getting there," he agreed. "One day at a time. That's all anyone can do." Nessa's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I'm proud of you, Colt Warrington." The simple statement hit him with unexpected force. When was the last time anyone had said they were proud of him? He couldn't remember. In the living room. Harper looked up from her book and caught his eye, a knowing smile crossing her face as she noticed his hand linked with Nessa's. "This is the best Christmas I've ever had," she said, her expression serene in the soft glow of the tree lights. Colt looked around at the small, warm gathering, his daughter, safe and thriving. His oldest friend, whose steady presence had become something more. Their home, preserved against all odds. What they had now wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on honesty and loyalty rather than facades. "It's just the first one that's real," he replied, and knew it was true. Whatever came next, they would face it together, eyes wide open.